Hello, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the There is a Floodlight That Never Goes Out podcast. As ever, I'm joined by Tom, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Alex Miller. How are you, Alex?
Yeah, very well, thank you, lads. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, very good.
So let's start by just telling the listeners sort of what your role is.
What is my role? Right, my job title is Sheffield Wednesday writer at the Sheffield Star. It's a gig that I sort of share with Joe Cran. We're sort of the Bert and Ernie of the Star, if you like, on the Wednesday side of things. And yeah, very, very, very lucky indeed to have what's pretty close to a dream job, really. Sort of go home and away, getting paid to watch football. Speaking to Wednesday figures, current, past, people around the club, and yeah, doing our best to bring the supporters all sort of the news, sort of entertain when we can with different bits and bobs, some sort of old features. It's not all sort of breaking news and that sort of thing as much as some people might like it to be. We do sort of put a lot of effort into entertaining people with the older stuff and the quirky stuff as well. And yeah, like I said, I'm incredibly lucky. I cannot explain how much I love my job. And, if you enjoy your job, you enjoy waking up every morning and going to work, then you're onto a winner, aren't you?
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah, and that's sort of something we want to ask you. Was it always sort of your dream to become a football journalist after you went through the painful experience that is you realise that you're not going to make it as a pro?
Yeah, exactly that. And I think it was quite early on for me. I realised I wasn't a terrible footballer, but I was certainly nowhere near. I had friends and my brother sort of had trials here, there, and everywhere. I was never anywhere near that stage. It was quite an honest, very slow, dreadful centre back who got a lot of yellow cards. But yeah, I think my first ever byline in a newspaper, I think I was 13, which was literally going to watch my little brother's rugby team and writing a report and just sending it off to the editor at the Ilkley Gazette, which was my local newspaper where I grew up. And yeah, from there, sort of decided that's what I wanted to do. It was always sort of a joke in the family that one day my brother would captain the England rugby team or the England football team, and I'd be in the press box reporting on him, sort of thing. So very, very young indeed, and delighted to have been able to get my foot in the door.
Yeah. So obviously, is it the Ilkley Gazette? So I'd imagine, am I right in thinking you're a Bradford City fan?
Yeah, so it's always an awkward one, this. I've grown up a Liverpool fan, basically. My family are a Liverpool fan. I come from a rugby family, so, not to the extent that my family were going home and away or anything, but my old man would certainly say that Liverpool was his team. So, yeah, sort of always grew up going to the odd Liverpool game here and there and that sort of thing. But yeah, as I got a bit older, Bradford sort of Ilkley sort of between Leeds and Bradford. And falling into the job that I'm in, it's a good job I didn't go to any of Leeds games, isn't it? But sort of started going to Bradford City when I was a young teenager, just because it was more accessible and cheaper than Liverpool, and fell in love with it, really. So I was a season ticket holder there for 2 or 3 seasons, and yeah, it's that awkward conversation. A lot of people get quite cross when you say you've got 2 teams, but I'm afraid I'm one of those.
Yeah, and on Bradford, I mean, what sort of era are you talking? Because it wasn't about 20 years ago they were in the Premiership. So, what sort of era of City?
Yeah, I was a young man at that point. So I'm 29.
Right. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do. Why do I look older? Is that what you're saying? How dare you? No, I was a young man. I do remember it clearly. I remember them getting promoted. I remember them staying up. If you remember it. We might not do, lads. At the expense of Liverpool on the last day, David Weatherall, a former Wednesday player, got the winner that day. So I remember all that. I went to a few games. I think my first Bradford game was the Wimbledon game, which was a huge game in them staying up that season.
Yeah.
And then from there, sort of went away from it a little bit. And then when I was old enough to start going on my own, me and a couple of pals started going, and it was a bit of a vehicle to have a few beers on a Saturday, really, and go home and away. Because if you remember, they ran a very cheap season ticket offer of 150 quid, and you can't say fairer than that, really. So yeah, it was a bit of a hazy winter. A couple of those.
Yeah.
So obviously, as they're starting away, you're just about to bring out a book on Sheffield Wednesday's famous 1991 season. I can't tell you, Alex, how many times my dad's told me about it, and it doesn't make me any less jealous. So what sort of inspired you to write the book?
Oh, that's a big question. I always had an ambition to get a book out before my 30th birthday, and I turned 30 in the middle of May. So as any of my bosses or my university lecturers would have told you, it's nothing like cutting it fine and getting it in just in time at the end. So I've obviously managed to do that. I think coinciding with the 30th anniversary of the cup final and obviously promotion. I hope I haven't spoiled the ending for anyone. But yeah, it all sort of came together. Obviously, we were stuck in lockdown this time last year at the sort of the outset of it, and a friend of mine, Danny Hall, who covers Sheffield United at the Star, he's basically my equivalent on the other side. He's got a publishing company, and we got talking. And yeah, it just made a lot of sense. I already sort of knew through work a couple of the guys that played in that team, and so was able to get my foot in the door there. And I think because of lockdown, because of the nature of it, everyone was bored with nothing to do. It was easier to get hold of people to speak to, and I was very, very lucky in that. I spoke to the vast majority of the players in that side. I think there was only 3 that made an appearance that season that I wasn't able to have a chat with, and the nature of Zoom and all the rest of it. I spoke to Gordon Watson in Costa Rica. I spoke to Roland Nilsson in Sweden, Paul Williams in Florida, all these guys, that were abroad, Carlton Palmer in Shanghai. So yeah, in one of the very, very small mercies of the pandemic, it did work to my advantage from the book. And it's just such an interesting story. There's such a range of characters. It's no secret that a number of the players in that side like to beer and that sort of thing. And so yeah, it's quite the more I got to know about this team and that season, the more fascinated I was, and I hope that people do enjoy reading it.
Yeah, I mean, you talked there about the alcohol sort of culture. Sort of through doing the book, what would you say is sort of the biggest change from modern football?
Oh, from there, it's massive, isn't it? Absolutely chalk and cheese. You speak to Roland Nilsson, for example. He was a Swedish international. He played at the 1990 World Cup. Was signed by Ron just before that. And when you speak to him about his first experiences of that drinking culture, really famous drinkers, people like Carlton Palmer and David Hurst and John Sheridan, these guys like to pint, and you listen to him. He'd won the UEFA Cup with Gothenburg before he'd come over and all this sort of stuff. Super, super professional. Took his body very, very seriously. And so, yeah, I think things have moved quite quickly towards that way of thinking as more and more foreign players have come in. I think the famous one and another Wednesday link is Paolo Di Canio and how he changed things at West Ham, which was another sort of famous drinking club, really. And, he moved things around quite quickly there. Arsene Wenger's control on Arsenal and move away from that famous Tuesday club and turn them into double winners and, a challengers to that great Manchester United side. So, yeah, I think things did move quite quickly. Players now, obviously we get to speak to players quite a lot. I can't imagine any of them, like a drink. Certainly not to the same extent of those guys. So yeah, I think the 90s was the big mover in that. As money came into it, it became more professional. English clubs were allowed to play in Europe a lot more, so that became more of a challenge for them. And certainly the influence of foreign coaches and foreign players was big on that front. Yeah,
and you say none of the current Wednesday players probably like a drink that much. I back Josh Windass, I think he looks like a drinker. Anyway, sort of as Ed said, there's been huge parallels from then to now. I mean, football's probably not the same game as it was 30 years ago. But why do you think Ron Atkinson was so successful with that Wednesday side?
First and foremost, it was a good side. You look at the spine of that team and very, very strong defensively with Nigel Pearson and Peter Shirtliff, and then the ideal central midfield in John Sheridan that can pick a pass and was an absolute genius, and Carlton Palmer who had the legs to get round, and Shez was able to pick up pockets of space, and then the same up front, David Hurst banging in the goals and Paul Williams doing all the legwork. Either side, Roland Nilsson, Phil King, Nigel Worthington, Danny Wilson, John Harks, those guys, and two very good goalkeepers in Kevin Pressman and Chris Turner, who were constantly challenging each other. So that first and foremost, it was a side that really, they played in the second division that season, and I mean, they finished third and were promoted, but it was on paper, it's the best team in that division by a street, I would suggest. So yeah, that's it first and foremost. But it was how to handle those players. It's a really interesting, I hope it's interesting passage at the front of the book about how Ron managed to keep hold of these guys. Obviously it's something that just couldn't happen today. There's no way a side with two players that went to the World Cup that summer and big names, people with the potential of David Hurst and those guys, there's no way that team could get relegated from what is now the Premier League and stay together. But Daly and Atkinson was the only player that they sold. They managed to get in two good players, and that was all down to Ron's personality. He just knew how to handle people. There's a story about one of the major players in that side on a pre-season trip to Italy. Alcohol-infused disagreement, shall we say, with Ron Atkinson, and punches are thrown, and
really,
and there was Ron had a tete-a-tete, shall we say, with one of these big players in the side, and the way he handled that, he called all the rest of the team down to a meeting the next day before they started training, and put it on them. He said, "Look, I'm thinking of getting rid of this player. I'm desperate to say his name, but I want to sell some books, lads."
That's okay.
I'm thinking of getting rid of him. What do you think? And the players turned around and said, "No, he's such a big player. We can't do it." And Ron turned around and said, "Right, well, it's your responsibility for the rest of the season. Then you've got to make sure that he stays in line. He doesn't step out of line again." And that it's just those little things that you just can't imagine happening today, and you can't imagine many managers getting away with, and just so clever the way that he did things. I think the stories about having a comedian called Stan Boardman, who I barely remember, so I'm sure you two won't. But he was on the coach on the way to Wembley for the cup final and all this sort of stuff. Just real maverick stuff. And yeah, just a huge personality that players wanted to play for. So yeah, and don't forget, I think a lot does get forgotten with Ron in that he was a big personality, and latterly when he stopped management, there was stuff that goes on that maybe clouds how good a football manager he was. He won major trophies with 3 English clubs, and there's not many managers that have done that. He was manager of Manchester United. You know what I mean? He took Aston Villa to Europe. He did what he did with Wednesday. So yeah, first and foremost, a very good team, expertly handled by Ron Atkinson, who at the same time was a very, very good manager. And you put all them together, there's no surprise they were that good, was there?
No, I mean, you talked about Ron there. I mean, there are some fans that called for him to come back to the club in sort of hierarchical role. And then you've seen fans recently. I guess this is sort of a credit to that squad, saying, "Oh, played Damayor for him in midfield. He's the new Carlton Palmer," and stuff like that. Very tenuous links. But this is sort of a revisionist view. But I think maybe in the long run, that team is sort of what's holding Wednesday back at this point. Is because people, try and make comparisons to that team. What are your sort of thoughts on that? Because we've had this conversation a lot recently about how big is Sheffield Wednesday at the minute, and how long can a giant sleep?
Yeah, it's a delicate thing with any fan base. I think I'll speak as I explained. As a bit of a Liverpool fan, a Liverpool fan. The constant, when things weren't going so well with Liverpool, and of course everything's relative, but the constant harking back to the ghosts of sides before, the pressure that being attached to a big club comes with. It's something that clubs just have to get on with. it's a difficult thing because by celebrating this team, by releasing this book, by walking through the corridors of Hillsborough and walking past the pictures of successes past, are you celebrating the past or are you hanging on to the past? And the bottom line is, I think if you spoke to any of these players and you asked them what happened in the 1990-91 season, I suspect very few of them will have a clue. I think that might be doing them a disservice, and the ones that are football obsessives, and there are a number of them in this Wednesday squad, will have a rough idea. But really, it's a fan thing. No one would trade Sheffield Wednesday to be a smaller club. It comes with its issues, and it does. I've done a couple of articles on the way to the shirt and players coming to play for Wednesday and lining up at Hillsborough the first few times and just melting, hearing hi-ho silver lining and finding it really, really difficult. And ultimately, it's just something that the club have to find a way to navigate and get through, which isn't easy. But it's not unique to Sheffield Wednesday. As I said, Liverpool on a grander scale. There's other clubs. Leeds United have been through it, having been down in the third tier, countless other clubs, Nottingham Forest and all sorts. So it's not unique to Wednesday, but it's one that that they have to navigate, as I say. And I think the past should be celebrated. I think the fact that was such an iconic side and there are icons to celebrate is something that the club should be very, very proud of.
Yeah, and one of the players in that side, Danny Wilson, I mean, he's a hero of mine, but also he was the manager the last time Wednesday were in the top division. So, I mean, that really tells you how long ago it was. How many years is it now? Is it 21 years moving on to the sort of season? So,
I think it was the 2001 season we got relegated.
Might have been 99, 2000. And actually, as I think we spoke about earlier, I think it was the season Bradford stayed up, because I think the three teams that went down were Watford, Wimbledon, Wednesday.
All I know is that I've never seen them there, and by the looks of it, we'll be waiting a long, long time. We've talked about the book, but where can we actually find it to pre-order?
If you badger me on Twitter, so I'm at Alex, at AlexMiller91. So I've got some copies, and I can do anyone a personalised message. I always feel a bit awkward saying signed by the author, because it makes it sound like a proper author, and it's just me writing some stuff down about football. But I can do a personalised message. If you get in touch with me, and we can sort out a copy. Alternatively, you can go to verticaleditions.com. So they're the publishers. They've got plenty of copies, and I think the official release is Friday this week. So if you head to Waterstones or WH Smith, I think there's a few dotted about in and around Sheffield as well.
Yeah, buy his book. If you're listening, buy it.
Please, I've got a wedding to pay for, so please do.
Well, good luck with the book release. I'll be sure to order a copy and read it, and looking forward to it. However, I feel that's a bit too much time spent on the good of Wednesday. Unfortunately, let's go to the bad, the present. Yeah. Let's start off with sort of the simple. Well, is it very simple? The question is, have Wednesday left themselves too much to do? Do you think?
I have said that for quite a while now, but in a cruel twist of the Championship, it just seems, it feels like all the teams down there at the minute, so there's three directly involved, are sort of, when you're walking down the pavement and you're awkwardly trying to get past, and you both go the same way, and then you go the same way again, and it feels like that at the minute, and no one's taking the ascendancy, and I still think, a few days ahead of the Forest game, if Wednesday win their last two matches, I think they'll probably stay in the division, which is crazy considering the issues that they have, how poor they've been. They have been a poor team for the vast majority of the season, everything that's been thrown at them. Weirdly, I don't think it's over. I think I wrote a fairly scathing piece after the Luton game, saying that if any manager is able to keep them up, it will be up there with anything that Howard or Ron or certainly Carlos achieved, because it just felt the club was absolutely rock bottom at that point. And although they've not had this new manager bounce, because other teams have been worse, I said on Twitter last night, 2 wins in 7, and Wednesday the form team in this relegation dogfight, which is ridiculous. But yeah, I just think they've got half a chance. And like I say, if they win both games, in my mind, I just can't see Rotherham or Derby doing enough to stave them off.
Yeah, I actually agree with Alex on that one. I mean, I'm always quite cynical about Wednesdays as a Barnsley fan. It always seems when we play you find a way to beat us, or you always get that jammy result that affects us. But being down there last season, it always goes down to the wire, and I back you in a crunch match against Derby 100%, just because I think your squad maybe has that little bit more to play for than Derby's does. I mean, half of Derby's team know they're securing a move to the Championship regardless of what they do. Whereas, I mean, this is a question we need to ask you, Alex. You broke the story today that many Wednesday players face a wage decrease. I mean, how do you see that affecting the squad?
I think with anyone, you'd be desperate to keep hold of it, wouldn't it? People are quite cynical about footballers and money and all the rest of it, and a lot of the time for good reason. But ultimately, first and foremost, these are footballers that want to remain Championship players. There's a big drop off in terms of kudos and reputation from a Championship player to a League One player. But yeah, I don't think it's any great surprise that some of these players, have relegation salary drop clauses. I think it's sort of fairly standard practice. But yeah, it's just another reason why they'll be, desperate to stay in the division. And it's not ideal that so many of them are at contract and so many of them are likely to be moving on. But certainly for those that are still around, it'll be a big part of their thinking.
Yeah, one player that looks destined to go. It was you that again broke the news that Fulham, West Brom, QPR, they're all watching Josh Windass, who for me is the player of the season. This season, it's been hard to pick one, but if I had to go for one, it would be Josh. Do you see him leaving this summer, even if Wednesday stay up? And B, if Wednesday was to go down, who's to leave? Do you think that would include some sort of relegation clause that he had in his contract?
My understanding is there isn't a direct relegation clause in his contract. Not that I'm aware of. Doesn't mean it's not there, but certainly, from the conversations that I've had, in terms of keeping, I think, look, they'll stand a much bigger chance of keeping hold of him if they stay in the Championship. Of course, they will. He seems to me to be, an ambitious player who's played at Rangers, of course. He's had that experience, playing in front of, big crowds every other week. He comes from a family that has played in the Premier League, and his dad Dean. So, yeah, I've no doubt that he's ambitious in the same way that a lot of other Wednesday players will be. If they go down, the club have a decision to make in that Josh has been involved through goals or assists. He's been involved in more than 40% of Wednesday's goals this season. So he's a key player. I mean, these are the sort of numbers that Barry Bannon has been getting in seasons past. So the club have a big decision to make because his contract ends at the end of next season. Obviously, if they don't sell him this summer, they risk losing him for nothing, which is something that the club have been criticised quite widely for players in the past. And there is the small matter, of course, of the finances of the club. Football finance experts put, the potential losses about £8 million from being relegated from Championship to League One. And, if you can recoup, I don't even know what a fair fee would be nowadays with the current climate, but if you could recruit anything between, I don't know, $750,000 up to $1.5 million, maybe off the top of my head. I don't know whether that's realistic or not, but it might well be that that's an attractive proposition rather than losing for free.
Am I right in thinking we paid $500,000 for him, or is that
roundabout? It was a difficult thing with Wigan because obviously they had receivers in at the time, so it wasn't a straightforward transaction. But yeah, we're led to believe it was around £500,000. That's
a bargain, by the way. I mean, we're going to talk about Wednesday's recruitment woes, but £500,000 for Windass is a bargain. And you say about the fee, I reckon Wednesday could probably get $2 million for Josh Windass personally. I mean, I've seen some of the players that that we've sold in the past. I think Windass is easily worth a couple of million. Anyway, we've spoke about if Wednesday left themselves too much to do and sort of the lack of manager bounce. But is Darren Moore the right man for Wednesday for this season and beyond?
It's always difficult to say, isn't it? So I'm not going to pin my colours to the mast directly. Other than that, I'll say I think so. Yeah. I've just been encouraged by the style of play. He speaks to the players. I think they're sort of all in on him. He seems quite a detail-focused manager. He wants Wednesday to play in the right way. And what's especially encouraging is his record with little things in jobs gone by. So his utilisation of the loan market at Doncaster was outstanding. We've got a Doncaster Rovers reporter who's covered the club and Darren's efforts there for a couple of years and said that was so impressive that he was getting these players from Premier League clubs on a shoestring budget, and he got them playing with an identity, and that's been the thing that's missed really at Wednesday, certainly since before I started covering the club. You know, you're going back really to, I don't know, the first season of Carlos.
Yeah.
To look for an identity and to look at a performance and go, right, that's how Sheffield Wednesday are going to win a football match. And I'm not sure that's been the case. It's been more the case the last few weeks. And although the points haven't been put on the board necessarily as often as people might like, I think the performances have been there. And I think it could be quite exciting with a full pre-season. And if the club is able to hand the keys over to Darren Moore and his people and say, look, build a side in your image. As I say, it could be quite exciting for Wednesday.
Definitely. I mean, off the top of my head, the likes of the performances against, the 2-1 loss to Norwich, we didn't embarrass ourselves that day. The loss to Watford, again, I thought we matched them for the majority of that game. There's definitely been an uptake in performance and, like you said, identity. And so one player who's really sort of starting, I wouldn't go as far as say shine, but, impress and be solid would be Joeppy. I mean, really unfairly, in my opinion, he's been scapegoated week in, week out since the moment he joined, really. There's that clip of him scoring that screamer for his old club, and I think as soon as that got banded about, people were expecting him to be something that he evidently was never meant to be. There's a lot of talk of sort of where he's going to go, but do you think Wednesday should be trying to tie Joey down for another season or two?
Yeah, another difficult one, because I think he, rightly or wrongly, I'd probably edge towards wrongly. He comes with a lot of baggage, and I think a clean break from a lot of the players in this squad would be quite a positive move in the eyes of supporters and would bring a lot more positivity in terms of pure footballing effort and what he brings to the squad. That there's certainly no evil in keeping Joey Pelopessi around. I think he's been fairly consistent this season in a squad that's been desperately inconsistent. He's not the sort of player that's going to score you 10 goals. He's not the sort of player that's going to rip a division to shreds, but he's steady. I can't say that he's on massive wages. And he's fit, which has been an issue with Sheffield Wednesday. I say that in a football sense. I'm not declining my love. But
he's a handsome git, though, isn't he?
He is a handsome bloke. He is a handsome bloke. But yeah, he stays fit, which Wednesday players in years gone by haven't always had, and he's dependable in that way. So, yeah, I think in League One, I think he could be a really useful player for Wednesday. It's just that balancing act now of whether a clean break from the majority of this squad, would be a good thing and would sort of spark a bit of a new feeling in the club. And also, you've got to remember for these foreign guys and people like Joost van Aken as well, the world has changed. These guys haven't seen their families for 18 months now. That it might be tempting. We saw the report from Holland earlier this week that he was linked with Groningen, and it could well be that it's not a Wednesday decision, and these players do want to move on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, Alex. You just re-jogged my memory there with Joost van Aken. He had a spell at the start of the season, then sort of, that sort of sums up, unfortunately, the recruitment of the past few years. But in fairness, and I want to give credit to Chansiri and the recruitment team, the loans aside, which is obviously quite a big area of our recruitment, but the actual signings we've made in terms of, I'm talking like Dom Iorfa for 250,000, Kadeem Harris on a free. Yes, he hasn't been amazing, but on a free, you can't really complain. We've been getting value for money. Josh Windass, Callum Patterson, these people who've paid,
Green,
on a free. The actual permanent signings have made a real impact. And in the summer, with the economic climate that is, and all our own personal financial troubles, do you think it will be a case of frees and loans and maybe the odd nominal fee here and there?
Yeah, I'd probably. It's difficult when we don't. We obviously haven't seen the latest accounts and the football world. I think going back to what you said about 2 million for Josh Windass. I think in a normal climate, and 18 months or 2 years ago, you'd be looking at more than 2 million quid. I think for a player that's done what he's done. But the modern football climate, if you take away the parachute payments and stuff like that, very, very difficult for any club to justify a transfer fee. So yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised if it was loans and frees. Obviously, I think in the last 2 years since I've been covering the club, there's been Massimo Luongo for somewhere around 900 grand, 1 million. Patterson for 500 grand and Josh Windass for 500 grand as well. So yeah, they're certainly not operating in the same stratosphere that they were doing.
Yeah.
I wrote a piece this week saying I think they could be clever in terms of the loan market, and you look at the last 3 or 4 transfer windows, what they've done in the loan market, they've gone for more established players that haven't quite come off. So Adrian Flint obviously had his own set of circumstances. Jack Marriott hasn't worked. Izzy Brown hasn't worked. Jacob Murphy had a very good second half of the season. Alicia de Cruz, Connor Wickham, those two didn't quite work. I think there could be cheaper options and more exciting options, particularly if they do drop into League One, to do what Darren Moore has done with Doncaster Rovers and pick up players that aren't known, 19-year-olds that maybe have got a few England youth caps and whatever, and more exciting, more unknown players that can maybe offer that a little bit more and would be considerably cheaper than some of these bigger names.
Yeah. I mean, one player who looks to have played his final game for Wednesday is Tom Lees after his injury. Do you have you had any sort of update on what the situation is with Tom?
No, I think the latest that we've heard is that I think Jamie Smith said after the game, didn't he, that there was no initial signs of a break or a fracture, but that basically they're having to wait for the swelling to go down to have a proper X-ray. So yeah, I think it's just a case of wait and see. I think I'd be surprised if he plays this weekend, but yeah, who knows? These things can sort of flare up and go away quite quickly. But yeah, I think it'd be a shame if that was his last game. And who knows what the future holds for Tom Lees? Maybe he's a player that they'll be looking at and hoping that they can keep hold of some experience, whatever division they're in next year.
Yeah, and I don't know if you'll remember this as a Liverpool fan, but I remember Mark Gonzalez once getting taken off the pitch with gas and air, and then the week after he was back playing.
Yeah.
So you never really know with these things.
That said more about Mark Gonzalez than anything else.
Yeah. We've talked maybe about transfers and outgoings. I mean, how important do you think it is now for Sheffield Wednesday to appoint a chief executive or a director of football to sort of ease the pressure on bringing players in?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's something that Dave Fonchansiri has always resisted. I think it's no secret that a lot of close observers of Wednesday would subscribe that bringing more football people into the club would be a good thing. But it just appears at the minute to be a bit of a non-starter, unfortunately. Yeah. So I'd love to give you a long and leering answer about my feelings towards it, but if my feelings are the moon should be made of cheese, it's just not going to happen, is it? So it's like I say, it's a difficult one. Wednesday before my time, obviously flirted with having people like Glenn Roeder and Adam Pearson in the club. But yeah, it just doesn't appear to be an option at the minute, which it may be a good thing. And Chansiri himself, to his credit, has said this. Maybe Darren Moore doesn't want people hanging around, but if he wants to give full autonomy to Darren Moore and to work alongside the recruitment team and do his own thing, then maybe director of football or anyone in that sort of role might be more of a hindrance. So
yeah,
he's got his own way that he wants to do it, and I think that'll be the case going forward.
Yeah. Let's move on to how sort of COVID has affected your job. What's it been like in stadiums without fans?
Horrible.
Yeah.
Genuinely. And I think it might come across sycophantic when we say this on Twitter and that sort of thing. But when I say it's horrible, it is. I remember the first few games, I was doing every game at that point because Joe wasn't in the country yet. He was still in South Africa. And yeah, I remember just feeling like it completely debased. It's this thing that we're all, we're through. I work in it. You guys want to work. We're sat here in a podcast obsessed with this industry of football, and it just felt I could have been watching pub football or under 11s on a park somewhere. It just completely debased this multi-billion-pound industry into what it is, which is a load of talented young men kicking all about. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's been tough. It's tough to. As I said, look, we're incredibly lucky to do what we do, but it's tough to keep yourself motivated to go through the slog of 3 games a week constantly. Without the fans there, it's crazy. It's a completely different experience for us. And look, you get used to it. I'm not going to lie, but my God, am I looking forward to fans being back in the ground. And yeah, it's been really, really difficult.
Yeah. We asked Joe Cran when we had him on the pod, and this question I'm about to ask, and he wasn't too much help because obviously COVID's affected it, but he said that you and Dom had been telling him about it. So which grounds have got the best press food?
Ooh, now you're coming into my specialist subject. I've got to say, a lot of the grounds that come down from the Premier League are very, very good. I had a beef madrassa at Brighton that was godlike.
Wow,
that's brilliant. That
is brilliant. I tell you what, for their credit, and it's the coldest ground that I've ever been to as well. But Hull City did a macaroni and cheese with some I'd like bacon sprinkles on top. Honestly, it blew my mind. It was absolutely cosmic. So yeah, it'd probably be those two. The worst, and I'm not just saying this to score points, and it's a ground that I worked at a lot before I got the Wednesday gig, Ellen Road. Now it might have changed now. It might change now since they've been in the Premier League, and you'd hope so. But yeah, it's just a lot of beige food.
Yeah. What's Wednesdays like?
Yeah, pretty good. Lashings of hendos, obviously.
Classic.
But yeah, chips, quite a lot of sort of shepherd's pie and that sort of stuff. So yeah, certainly towards the European places, I'd say, in terms of the league table.
Yeah, and I mean, if me and Ed ever get into football journalism, we'll be sure to check out the cosmic macaroni cheese.
Please do.
At the KC. Sort of, this is probably going to be a bit more personal now rather than Wednesday based, but Liverpool this season, not really been the greatest of season, has it? For Jurgen Klopp's men. I mean, other than the obvious Van Dijk, why do you think it's gone so wrong?
Yeah, I think that sort of set it on its way. But I think it was only one part of it, really. I think if you look at the history of great sides across any sport, they've constantly got to evolve. And Alex Ferguson was very, very good at that with that great United side over the course of a decade.
Yeah.
Every season there'd be one big addition here or a little tune-up here or bringing a good young player there. And I'm not sure that the Thiago signing quite achieved what they'd wanted it to. And I think it's a side that's exhausted. I think you look back at really the last Obviously, they won the Premier League last year. The year before, they got 97 points.
Yeah.
Which, to all intents and purposes, apart from the fact that Man City were out of this world, they've basically won a league there. Won the European Cup again, going back a season or two before European Cup finals, all this sort of stuff. So this is a side that's been operating at the highest level for such a long time with more or less the same people. And yeah, eventually it takes its toll. So I'd say that's the biggest part of it. I think Liverpool certainly in the European Cup were damaged by not having supporters in grounds. One of many clubs. So it's not a woe is me thing from a Liverpool point of view, but yeah, a huge number of things really. And I can see there being some changes really in the summer. It'd be interesting really because Klopp's never quite done that sort of transformation of a club before. Things went to hell in a handcart quite quickly, obviously at Dortmund, and he never had that sort of huge squad turnover. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes about it.
Yeah, and I think this is sort of becoming a bit of a regular question that we ask all our guests now since sort of the Super League news. But it's something we want to ask a lot of people, and it's: have you sort of got 3 predictions for the next decade of football?
I'm anyone that has got any sort of view on my political beliefs or view of the world would say that I'm very, very cynical of the world that we live in.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't like to say. I think ultimately 9 times out of 10 money wins. And I'll put it on record because I was going to write a piece on this, but obviously in a Sheffield newspaper, it doesn't really have that much of a place. But my view and love for Liverpool as a young lad growing up was built on the club that it always has been in. A club that mirrored my political beliefs and built on the socialist ideas of Bill Shankly and all this sort of stuff. And
yeah.
And this last few weeks, from Project Restart really has been so far removed from that and the vision of the club that they sell it on and they sell tickets on and tout and all this sort of stuff. So it's been really, really difficult for me, and I know lots and lots of other people at other clubs as well. And certainly, I've sort of said I'm not spending another penny while that set of owners are there, which I think will be a long time because money wins quite a lot. So yeah, in terms of predictions, more money, more greed, more strong arming into pushing things towards the bigger clubs. From that point of view, I think another prediction for the next 10 years. Put me on the spot.
I know everyone says it. I mean, obviously I mean to put you on the spot a little bit, but it's a tough one, isn't it?
I'd like to see Wednesday. I'll go for it. I'd like to see Wednesday in the Premier League, and I'll say that because things seem so far away from that at the minute. But if you looked at Wolves, if you looked at Leeds United, if you looked at, dare I say, Sheffield United at certain points, that would have felt like pie in the sky stuff as well. And things can turn around quite quickly once things get rolling in the right direction. Momentum is massive in sport, no matter what sport. So yeah, I'd like to see in the next 10 years Sheffield Wednesday in the Premier Division.
I don't think that's too unrealistic, because last season we stayed up with the last kick of the game away at Brentford. This year now we're 3 games off the top division. So yeah,
absolutely.
I don't think it's too unrealistic, that one.
And if nothing else, I get to try the press food at all those grounds. So.
Yeah.
Well, on that positive note, I think let's end it there. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast, Alex. Really appreciated. And obviously, you all know where to find the book and go and pre-order it. As ever, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and probably somewhere else that I've forgotten. So please feel free to drop us a comment and give us a like. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.